The sister who borrowed my wedding dress without asking, to my parents' delight, and ruined it. I pretended to be devastated, but what they didn't know was what her real gift had been. I was halfway through my morning coffee when my phone rang. My mother's name appeared on the screen. I hesitated a moment before answering. Conversations with her rarely left a good taste in my mouth. "Valeria, good morning," she began in her usually cheerful tone, a bad sign. "Good morning," I replied cautiously. There was a brief pause and then, "Isabel is going to wear your wedding dress." I blinked. "What? The dress?" "Darling," she repeated as if I hadn't heard her the first time. "It fits her perfectly." Her carefree tone chilled my blood, as if it was already decided, as if my opinion didn't matter. For a moment I felt breathless. My wedding dress, the one I had chosen with trembling hands and a heart full of hope, the dress that never made it to the altar because Alejandro, my Alejandro, never made it to our wedding day. I gripped the phone tighter, my heart pounding with fury in my ears. "That dress is mine," I said slowly, trying to remain calm. Mom let out a sigh, that kind of sigh she used every time according to her I was overreacting. "Valeria, you're not using it. It's just there gathering dust. It would be a shame to waste it." A waste. I felt rage rising in my throat. "It's not about the dress," I snapped. "It's about you always deciding for me." "Oh, please don't be dramatic," she said lightly. "You have to move on. Isabel's wedding is a perfect opportunity for all of us to move forward as a family. You wouldn't want to ruin her big day over something so small, would you?" Small. It wasn't small. It never had been. The memories hit me like an avalanche. "Valeria, give your room to Isabel, she needs more space. Valeria, give her your bike, you hardly use it. Valeria, let Isabel go on the trip, she deserves it more than you." Isabel deserved. It had always been that way. I brought a hand to my forehead, breathing deeply. "You didn't even ask me." Silence. "I didn't think I had to," Mom replied, and in that instant I knew. They had already taken it. I stood up abruptly, making the chair scrape the floor. "Where is it?" I demanded. "Isabel already has it," Mom admitted, in that soft voice she used when she wanted to downplay something. "She took it to the dressmaker to have some alterations done." Pure, icy, and relentless cold ran through my veins. They hadn't just asked. They hadn't just suggested. They had taken it. For the first time in my life, I felt something inside me break. "No." Silence. "No," Mom repeated, as if it had never occurred to her that I could refuse. "No," I repeated, my voice firm as steel. "I'm going to get my dress back." And this time they weren't going to stop me. The next morning I woke up with a strange feeling, a mixture of anxiety and determination. I dressed quickly, grabbed my keys, and headed to my parents' house. I was going to get my dress back. When I arrived, I rang the doorbell forcefully. Mom opened the door with her usual expression, that mixture of condescension and feigned patience. "Valeria, don't make a scene," she said warningly. "I'm not making a scene. I just want my dress." She sighed as if she were exhausted. "We already talked about this, darling. Isabel needs it more than you." I pushed the door open and entered without waiting for an invitation. I went straight to the room where I used to keep my dress. I opened the closet. Empty. I stood paralyzed for a second before turning to Mom. "Where is it?" I demanded. Mom didn't even bother to hide it. "We took it yesterday with Isabel. She's trying it on right now." The cold in my chest turned to fire. "You took it without my permission?" "Valeria, don't exaggerate." Before I could respond, I heard footsteps on the stairs. Isabel came down with a radiant smile, her face full of that confidence she always had when she got exactly what she wanted. "Well, what a surprise to see you here," she said mockingly. My eyes fell to her hand. She was holding a bag from the alterations boutique. "Tell me you didn't," I murmured. Isabel smiled even wider and held up the bag. "The dress is mine now, Valeria," she said with venomous sweetness. "I had it adjusted. Now it fits me perfectly." Something inside me snapped. "Give it back." Isabel laughed. Laughed as if all this were a joke, as if it were ridiculous that I would even ask. "It's already done. You can't undo it." "Why?" I blurted. "Because that dress will never be yours." "God, Valeria, it's not for you," she exclaimed, crossing her arms. You weren't even going to use it. What does it matter? I opened my mouth to respond, but at that moment her phone vibrated. Isabel took it out of her pocket and unlocked it with an automatic smile. And there I saw it. The name Carlos. The message. I can't be without you. Don't do this. My mind went blank. Carlos, not Alvaro, her fiancé. Carlos. The memories fell into place all at once. Isabel and Carlos had been inseparable years ago, but her family never accepted him. Carlos had no money, no prestigious last name, no bright future that my mother wanted for her daughter. It had been a forbidden love, and now, on the eve of her wedding, she still hadn't left him behind. My eyes met hers, and for the first time I saw her hesitate. Oh, I said, my tone softer now. So it's not for love. Isabel blinked rapidly. I don't know what you're talking about. I leaned in a little closer. You know perfectly well what I'm talking about. For the first time she seemed uncomfortable. Then my phone vibrated in my pocket. A message from an unknown number. If you want to get back what's yours, come tomorrow to Café Lluvia at 10. My pulse quickened. I looked up and met Isabel's defiant gaze. She had no idea what was coming, but I did. I barely slept that night. I tossed and turned in bed with the image of Isabel smiling in my dress etched in my mind. But more than that, the mysterious message wouldn't leave me alone. If you want to get back what's yours, come tomorrow to Café Lluvia at 10. I had no idea who had sent it, but one thing was certain, I was going. The next morning, I arrived at Café Lluvia a few minutes early. The place was almost empty except for a man sitting at a table by the window. He was wearing dark glasses and a worn leather jacket. When I entered, he looked up and smiled wryly. I didn't think you'd come, he said. I stopped dead in my tracks. Carlos. My heart skipped a beat. You sent me the message? Yes. I knew you wanted answers. I approached slowly, 1,000 questions in my head. Carlos gestured for me to sit down. I ordered a coffee, although I knew I probably wouldn't be able to take a single sip. Why are you doing this? I asked, watching him suspiciously. Carlos sighed and ran a hand through his hair. He looked exhausted. Because Isabel is making a mistake. My breath hitched. So you still love her? Carlos let out a bitter laugh. I've always loved her. But I was never enough for her. His gaze darkened. 2 months ago she looked me up. She told me she missed me, that she wasn't sure about her marriage to Alvaro, that she still thought about me. Like an idiot, I believed her. He leaned forward. But then I realized the truth. She didn't look for me because she missed me. She looked for me because she was afraid. Afraid of what? Carlos clenched his jaw. Isabel doesn't love Alvaro. She's marrying him because it's what her mother wants, because it gives her stability, because her family raised her to seek a good marriage. But when she realized she was about to take that step, she got scared and looked for me. And what happened after? Carlos laughed bitterly. The usual. She played with my feelings for a while, and then went back to her perfect world. She blocked me everywhere as if I never existed. His eyes bored into mine. But I'm not that easy to erase. I shuddered. Why are you telling me this? Carlos smiled. Because you're the only one who can do something about it. I looked at him warily. What do you mean? He leaned over the table, his voice a whisper. I want you to ruin the wedding. My breath stopped. What? Carlos shrugged. Come on, Valeria. You know she doesn't deserve your dress, and she doesn't deserve this marriage. His smile widened. And besides, don't tell me you wouldn't like to see her face when it all blows up. I stared at him, feeling adrenaline coursing through my body. Could I really do this? I thought about my dress, how it had been taken from me without permission. I thought about my whole life, giving in to Isabel, how she had everything and it was never enough. I thought about my Alejandro, about the wedding we never had. My fingers trembled as I picked up my coffee cup. I'm listening. Carlos smiled. Perfect. And so the plan began. The wedding day dawned sunny, perfect, too perfect. As if the universe didn't know what was about to happen. I dressed calmly, choosing an elegant, sober outfit. I wanted to be impeccable when it all came crashing down. My phone vibrated. Everything's ready. I took a deep breath. It was time. When I arrived at the church, the ceremony was about to begin. There were white flowers everywhere. The guests chatted among themselves, oblivious to what was about to happen. It looked like a wedding straight out of a magazine. My mother saw me and smiled with relief. "Valeria, I'm glad you decided to come," she said, as if nothing had happened, as if they hadn't stolen my dress. I didn't answer. I just smiled at her. "Enjoy it while you can, Mom." I sat in one of the back rows and took out my phone. The hidden_Truth's Instagram account was ready. There was just one step left: post. I uploaded the screenshots of Isabel's messages with Carlos. The dates, the "I miss you," the "I can't be without you." Let the world see what she had done. Minutes later, the music began. The wedding march. Everyone stood as Isabel appeared at the entrance. My dress. My damn dress. I didn't blink as she walked down the aisle with the confidence of a queen. But her kingdom was about to fall. When she reached the altar, Alvaro looked at her adoringly. Poor idiot. The priest began to speak. "We are gathered here today to join together in holy matrimony, Isabel and Alvaro." Vibration. Alvaro's phone. I saw him frown, take out his mobile and look at the screen. The posts. His expression changed in seconds. Confusion, doubt, rage. "What's wrong?" Isabel whispered, touching his arm. Alvaro looked up and stared at her coldly. "Who is Carlos?" A murmur ran through the church. Isabel's face paled. What are you saying?" she stammered. Alvaro held up his phone and began to read aloud. "I can't be without you. Don't do this." "Alvaro doesn't mean anything. I just need security." Boom. The silence in the church was suffocating. "That's a lie," Isabel whispered. Alvaro turned the screen so everyone could see the photos of Isabel with Carlos. The caresses, the kisses. The murmur turned into chaos. "This isn't what it looks like," Isabel shouted, but it was useless. Everyone had seen it. The guests were recording with their phones. "Tell me it's not true," Alvaro demanded, his voice trembling with rage. Isabel stammered, desperately searching for Mom's, Dad's gaze. But no one was going to save her this time. Carlos stood up at the back of the church. "Tell him, Isabel," he said loudly, his arms crossed. It was the final blow. Alvaro took the rose from his lapel and threw it on the floor. "This wedding is not happening." He turned and left, leaving Isabel alone at the altar. My sister gasped as if she had been slapped. I stood up and walked slowly towards the exit. Before leaving the church, our eyes met. She was destroyed. I was at peace. This time I won. The silence in the church was unbearable. Everyone was paralyzed after the scandal. Isabel was in shock, the bouquet trembling in her hands. Alvaro was gone. The murmur of the guests grew. Glances went from Isabel to the phones where the messages and posts continued to explode. Social media was already taking care of her sentence. Unfaithful bride exposed in the middle of wedding. Who is Carlos, the man behind the scandal of the year? The exact moment the groom leaves her at the altar. My mother grabbed her by the arms, trying to snap her out of her trance. "Isabel, my love, calm down. We can fix this." But Isabel didn't respond. Her face was empty, her eyes fixed on the door. Dad, who had remained in his seat, his face tense, took a step forward. "How could you be so stupid, Isabel?" His tone was full of icy contempt. Tears filled my sister's eyes. For the first time in her life, our father wasn't saving her. "It's not my fault," she shouted, pointing a trembling finger at me. "It was her. Valeria ruined my wedding." All eyes turned to me. I crossed my arms, completely calm. "No, Isabel. You ruined your own wedding." The phones kept vibrating with new messages. Everyone was receiving the videos and screenshots. It couldn't be stopped anymore. Mom looked at me, her face full of fury and shame. "Valeria, what have you done?" "What I had to do." Dad closed his eyes, trying to keep calm. He knew this wasn't just affecting Isabel, but him as well. The bride's family faces the worst humiliation. The end of the Mendoza prestige. Isabel began to breathe raggedly, her chest rising and falling as if she couldn't control the air. I can fix this," she stammered. But it was useless. No one was going to save her. Carlos, who until then had remained at the back of the church, approached slowly. "Well, Isabel," he asked with a mocking smile, "do you want to tell the story yourself or shall we do it for you?" Isabel's face went from despair to absolute rage. You're selfish, Carlos. No more than you, he replied calmly. The guests were stunned. No one knew whether to leave or stay to see how the show ended. Dad turned to Carlos coldly. Get out of here. Carlos shrugged and walked to the door. But before leaving, he stopped and gave me one last look. Valeria, a pleasure doing business with you. I smiled slightly and nodded. Mission accomplished. I turned and walked calmly toward the exit. I had nothing more to do there. Behind me, I heard Isabel's sobs and Mom's shouts, but I didn't stop. For the first time, I didn't care. 48 hours later, the scandal exploded completely. Alvaro disappeared without a trace. He closed all his social media accounts and sent his lawyers to demand the return of every penny spent on the wedding. Dad tried to do damage control, but the media was already devouring the story. The shame of the Mendoza family. Fall of a princess. The infidelity that destroyed an empire. Rich dad, stupid daughter. The family's prestige crumbled in less than 48 hours. But that wasn't the worst part. Mom started receiving calls from friends who no longer wanted to see her at events. Dad lost an important contract because his partner didn't want to be linked to the scandal. Isabel stopped leaving the house. I, on the other hand, slept like a baby. A week later, the final encounter. I was at a cafe enjoying my victory when I received an unexpected message. Isabel, meet me at Café Lluvia in an hour. I smiled. I knew she would come. When I arrived, she was already there. She looked shattered. No elegant dresses, no makeup, no arrogant attitude. She looked normal. I stopped in front of her, arms crossed. What do you want? She looked up slowly. Her eyes were red and swollen. I want to understand why you did it. I let out a dry laugh. Really? After everything? She nodded, looking down. For the first time in her life, Isabel didn't have a ready answer. I sat next to her, sighing. Because it was time, I said. I simply spent my whole life giving in to you. She swallowed but said nothing. You always won. Mom and Dad always gave you everything. But not this time. Isabel squeezed her eyes shut. Everyone hates me, she whispered. Mom won't talk to me. Dad barely looks at me. They took away my credit cards. I had to make an effort not to laugh. What a tragedy, I said ironically. It's not a joke, Valeria. I lost everything. I shrugged. Welcome to my world, Isabel. Isabel clenched her fists. Do you hate me that much? I remained silent for a few seconds before answering. No, not anymore. That was the truth. I didn't hate her anymore. I didn't feel anger or resentment or pain. I felt peace. For the first time in my life, I was free. I stood up and looked at her one last time. Now it's your turn to learn to live without someone giving you everything. She looked at me, her face empty. That's it. Yes, that's it. I turned and walked away without looking back because for the first time, Isabel wasn't my problem, and she never would be again.